Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Just a disclaimer that all information discussed here today is not financial advice, it's purely for educational and information purposes. And if you do require financial advice, I am a certified financial planner, so feel free to drop me a message and I'll be happy to help. So on that note, enjoy and click that red subscribe button. Thanks, bye. So we're going to look at one of Africa's largest mobile operators, MTN, and I want to show you why. When it comes to shares, it's people are not really examining fundamentals. It's more sort of emotional, right? It's an emotional decision. So as you can see here, from the time they started, MTN was on a massive upward trajectory, right? All the way up until 2015, right? So a share at 2015 was like around 240 Rand a share, right? So slightly higher in before that, but let's just go with 240, right? Then what happens in 2015? Nigeria, one of MTN's largest markets outside of South Africa, decides to impose a 5 billion US dollar fine on MTN for failing to deregister SIM cards on time. So there was an operating compliance requirement, and MTN met it. And what did that do? That literally pushed the share price. It basically halved its share price in under 5 to 6 months, right? So this was in 2016. So if you bought your shares or you invested R1 million here, you'd be sitting with 500,000. You would have lost half of your stack of whatever you had invested at the time, right? So MTN begins negotiation with the Nigerian government, and in 2017 they come to an agreement where they'll pay one third of the fine. So they didn't pay the 5.2, they paid around 1.7 odd billion, right? As an admission of guilt. And yeah, so that happened, but it never really pushed the price of the share back up, right? So nowhere near there. So it stayed flat in that trajectory. Then the next bombshell hit. So the next bombshell was MTN being accused of taking dividends out of the country illegally without Reserve Bank approval, right? So what did this do? So, the value of the share was already halved. So after stabilizing a little bit at 134 Rand, the share drops all the way down to 70 Rand a share, now facing the prospect of this fine. So yeah, so you basically lost half there again. So we hear people always say huddle, hold on for dear life. Sometimes that's not true. Sometimes cutting your losses earlier is better than not. It's always good to have someone you can trust and someone you can bounce ideas off. Yeah, because the same thinking that was successful in the past is not necessarily going to be successful in the future. Because if you are holding now, waiting to go back up here, what happens? After much negotiation about the dividend issue, MTN pays another fine to the Nigerian regulator, much lower than the 8 billion they were demanding, something like 53 million US dollars. And things started to pick up, and then COVID happens. Yeah, so once COVID happened, you could see there was another dump. So the share has since recovered a bit, so it's gone up from the COVID lows of 47 Rand a share all the way up to sort of 141 odd Rand a share. And this just goes to show also that it doesn't follow business fundamentals, price action necessarily. This is more emotional driven. Fear, greed, all those things come into play when you're looking at equities. Because if you just examine this business purely on fundamentals, this business today compared to 2015 it has about 40 million more subscribers. It's got about 270 million subscribers today. It's got more diversified revenue streams in terms of data. It's also innovative. It's got fintech, it's got mobile money, it's got all these innovations, yet none of that is priced in here. Yet look at the price here. So fundamentals and price action aren't necessarily linked always. So that's something to bear in mind when you're looking at companies and you're analyzing equities. Because I don't know if you know this, that only 15% of fund managers beat a benchmark every year. That means 85% of them get it wrong. And they have access to the best teams, best minds, best analysts. Now, you as a single person, what chance do you really have of, beating the odds with your sort of limited resources, right? So doing due diligence is vital. Steinhoff, right? So similar to Enron, everyone was telling you how wonderful Steinhoff was. Things were going well. Yeah, and what we saw was one of the biggest corporate frauds in South African history, and boom, share price dropped, and everyone was panicking. And yeah, those are the risks that come attached with shares. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, right? So I don't want to become this naysayer and this bringer of doom and gloom, because there are opportunities. I mean, if you take companies like Naspers, if you got in 2003, you would have more than 100x your money. I think it's like 115x today, right? So there are companies, and at that time, Naspers was just a media company. They didn't have anything to do with tech, but once they got into tech, they really exploded, right? Especially with that Tencent investment. So yeah, so shares in a company do have the potential to create life-changing and generational wealth. It's just that you need to know what you are doing and what you are looking for when you are investing. So let's have a look at some of the opportunities. Where are the opportunities right now? In my mind, this is one of the biggest opportunities over the next sort of 8 years. The African Continental Free Trade Area, and this act is, it's not an 8 year plan, it's more like a 38-year plan, right? So what it aims to do is to industrialize Africa, to reduce the barriers to trade within Africa. So if you are looking at companies and shares that you want to invest in, start looking at market leaders that are in a position to take advantage of this. Because just to give you the stats, it took Africa about 30 years to go from 100 million to 300 million in the middle class. But it's only going to take 8 years to grow this middle class from 300 to 500 million. So we're going to add 200 more middle class people in Africa over the next 8 years. Huge opportunity, because what do middle class people consume? They need access to finance, whether it's a bond, car, uh, cell phones, data, insurance, medical aid. All those kind of things are, huge opportunities and huge growth areas, because the population is also going to grow from 1.3 to 1.7 billion people. And you've got a young, vibrant population. 60% of the population will be under the age of 35 by 2030, right? You also need to look at companies that are developing ecosystems, not businesses. So I used MTN as that example because they developed an ecosystem now. So it's a fintech ecosystem. They didn't think of that themselves. They sort of modeled it on Apple, because Apple was the world's first $1 trillion company, and they did it not just focusing on one product or product market fit. They said, how can I build an ecosystem? You've got a phone, now maybe you want a laptop, maybe you'll have a watch, and then we're going to tie you into this ecosystem. We're going to deliver you content via Apple TV and all those kind of things. We're gonna diversify our revenue streams, and we're gonna keep you locked in. So look for companies that are building ecosystems. And one of the key drivers in what I see happening, and this is just my personal speculation, is I see a lot of deregulation happening. After MTN and all that kind of thing, or after the first global financial crisis, we went through a period of massive regulation over the last 15 years. We're at a point now in this country where regulation is more, you know, some companies, and I can tell you this for a fact from insurance, some insurance companies that have more people working in compliance than they do in, in sales divisions. Doesn't make any sense. Who's bringing you in your revenue? Who's paying, if you're generating 1 rand in sales, how can you spend 2 rand in compliance, right? Yes, I understand the fines and all of that, and all that needs to be complied with. I'm not arguing with that, but we reached a point where we're over regulating. People are interpreting regulations in their own eyes and driving these things in companies that are not making it business friendly and creating these barriers to growth. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in terms of equities. So equities is a long-term asset class. It has the potential to create generational wealth. And there's always opportunities, guys. Always opportunities. A lot of people saw COVID, we saw problems and that. But there were people who looked for opportunities. And I'm just going to end off with this little clip here because I think it's quite interesting. No matter how young or how old you are, it's never too late to start a business. It's never too late to start a company. And these young guys are just living testament to that. So thanks for tuning in. Take care. Bye.
When we started this 12 months ago, every conversation we had was, you're totally out of your mind, this is never going to work.
Yet, in less than a year, these two Stanford University dropouts have managed to prove these early doubters wrong.
At that point, we had already scaled to a couple $1 million of annualized revenue. We said, here's an opportunity to raise a large amount of capital. It's got clear product market fit. How many people in their lifetimes get an opportunity to build a potential generational company? And we figured that was just sort of a more exciting opportunity than studying at an elite university.
And their leap of faith has so far paid off. The 19-year-old founders intend to change the way groceries are delivered in India. Their company is now valued at $900 million. Adit Palicha and Kavalia Vora are the founders of Zepto, a startup from India that promises to deliver groceries in less than 10 minutes. They are just one of many businesses to join the wave of what's known as quick or instant commerce. The childhood friends founded the business in July 2021, right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Operations started 2 months later. At the time, there was a surge in demand for delivery services as many stayed home during nationwide lockdowns. Zepto says it's now adding 100,000 new users daily ever since its launch 1 year ago, making it one of the fastest growing quick commerce apps in India.
Grocery is such a high frequency category. It's not a purchase that you make once a month or, once every 2-3 months. You're making grocery purchases, at least in India, multiple times a week, right? And so when you're engaging in a chore that's very high frequency, the friction of getting that chore done is paramount.
The idea for Zepto came while they were stuck inside their homes in Mumbai during a lockdown.
At that time, online groceries would take 6-7 days to deliver. Offline options were practically shut down or unavailable, right? So it was incredibly difficult for us to get groceries. And we had sort of similar conversations with our neighbors that complained about pretty much the same problem. That's when we said, hey, we love building. We've done that sort of growing up as kids as well. Why don't we try building a solution for the folks in our neighborhood?